أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessings of the holy month of Ramadan. This is a month which comes with the special significance to the Quran, and we get the opportunity to look at some of the ayat of this holy book more from the perspective of Tafsir. The surah that we have been discussing is Surah Rahman, surah number 55 of the Quran. It's a surah described by the Prophet as Urusul Quran. It is the most distinguished surah of the Quran. And the main distinction is that the very first word is the name, the unique name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insan, allamahu al-bayan. This is a surah which talks about the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's why the first word is Rahman, talking about the Rahmaniyat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We looked at the earlier blessings as far as this surah is concerned. The first was the Quran as the source of guidance. Second was the creation of the human being. Third was where he says Allamahul Bayan, as a reflection of the intellectual capacity that Allah has given to the human beings. And yesterday we looked at the other ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ بِحُسْبَانٍ, that the sun and the moon have been described as one of the greatest blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They move according to their own calculation, but they also form the basis for our timings in different ways. And we ended with the ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says وَالنَّجْمُ وَالشَّجَرُ يَسْجُدَانِ, referring to the herbs and the trees who submit to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To continue with the discussion, we will look at about three ayats this evening, ayat number 7, 8, and 9. After talking about the sun and the moon, and then immediately coming to the earth where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about وَالنَّجْمُ وَالشَّجَرُ, the herbs and the fruits in the trees for us. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again goes to the heavens and the earth. He begins by talking about وَالسَّمَاءِ رَفَعْهَا وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعْهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ. He again talks about the sama, about the heavens. He talked about the sun and the moon, but then he's going even further out. This is ayat number 7. And in ayat number 10, he talks about the earth. وَالْعَرْضُ وَضَعَهَا لِلْأَنَامِ. Between the sama and the arz, between the sky and the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about mizan. And it's interesting, even this placement of the words, why he talks about certain things in between has its own significance and meaning. If you look at this ayat, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعْهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ, he is the one who raised the sky, the sama, وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ, and then he set up the balance. What does it mean? And what do the words later on, أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ. These are the following two ayat. Let us look at the first sentence. وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعْهَا. When you look at sama, the word as-sama comes from sumuv, which means something which is high. the way we'll call it bulandi, something which is high up. And this term in Quran is used for different things. Here in the context, it can apply to the blue sky that we see, the beautiful sky, or it could also apply to the atmosphere which is around the globe, which we do not necessarily see, but the science tells us about it. And one of the important functions of this atmosphere around the globe is basically to protect the earth from different elements, whether it's the meteorites in the space which comes towards the earth. Many of them in very large number come towards the earth, but before they come into the atmosphere, they basically are destroyed. And so that atmosphere around the earth itself works as a protective shield. And also when it comes to the light, and it's amazing that the light from the sun is the source of our life, the source of life of the vegetation. But how much should it come to the earth? That's again very important. And that's where this atmosphere around the globe, works as a mechanism to only allow that much of light from sun which will sustain human life on this planet. And so this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks about the sama, whether it's the sky or the atmosphere, this is one of the blessings and ala or from the ni'mat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ. Mizan here basically looking at the context. He talks about the sama which is up there. And many times when we want to talk about some important things, we always elevate it, to show the importance of that. And so immediately after saying وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ, He raised the sky above the earth. Of course, when we say above, it's relative to where you are. It's all around us, whether it's look at the top of the globe or the bottom, but wherever human beings are, for them in a relative sense, sama is up there. And وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ, and He set up the mizan, the balance. Here, basically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the mizan that I have established for the creation of the system, the way the sama is there, the way the shams and qamar is there, the way the earth is there with this protective shield around it, and the way they move around. This is all based on a very balanced system. If anything was changed, human life would not be sustainable on this planet. And so if you look at it, the distance, according to science, from the earth to the sun is appropriate for survival of human life on it. If it was more or less, then the heat coming here would not be sustainable for us. If the earth was further up, again, we will not be able to survive. So even the distance between the earth and the sun is very important. The speed of the earth rotating around itself. There is another ayat in Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have placed mountains on the earth so that it would regulate the movement of the earth. So the mountains that you see, they are, it's like from the engineering point of view, Allah puts these pegs around just to balance the movement. Because if the earth was moving at a lesser speed than its present speed, we would have a problem. We would have longer days. In summer, what will happen to us, especially Ramadan. And, when you look at, and if it was going even faster, it would be, again, difficult for us. If you look at the distance of the moon from the earth, that is also, because when you look at the tides, that's all regulated by the relationship of the moon to the earth. And of course the atmosphere itself, I already mentioned about it. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about mizan, He's talking about a balanced system that He has created to bring about this solar system that we can see. The alameen is much, much broader than that, which is beyond our comprehension and beyond the grasps of our understanding. Salawat. Ayat number 8. Allah tatghaw fil mizan. Do not infringe the balance. It's interesting, when you look at it, that when we talk about mizan here, here the term mizan has come again. It's a repetition. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeats the same word in 3 sentences, it means that probably he is talking about 3 different things, or the dimensions of that word and the meaning related to it would be different. Otherwise, from the grammatical point of view, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could just have said that, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ أَنْ لَا تَتْغَوْا فِيهِ, and do not infringe upon it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say fihi. He repeats the word fil mizan. And in the following ayat again, وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانَ. Again, 3rd time, he repeats the term mizan. And this is where the Mufassirin say that all these 3 places that this mizan is coming has a different meaning to it. When it comes to the first one, as I said, it refers to the system that Allah has created. There is a balance in it. The second one, Allah tatghaw fil mizan. This is addressed to us. This is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not infringe on the mizan that I'm giving to you. This refers to the Sharia laws. Divine laws sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the prophets. They are mizan of our action. We are not allowed to infringe on that mizan. And if you look at the older days, now we live by the digital world. But mizan those days was the scale, and it has to be maintained all the time. And here when it says do not infringe, always maintain the mizan of that scale that you have. And this refers to the laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to us. The Sharia is the mizan for what is right and wrong, what is halal and haram, what is desirable and what is not desirable in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then we come to the 3rd one. وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانَ. Maintain the weight with fairness and do not diminish the balance. Those days when you had the weighing scale, if you even go to the 3rd world countries now, when you buy something, they will put an empty paper bag. You want 1 kilo of sugar, they will take it out, put the sugar in it, with a 1 kilo stone on the other side of the scale. And when it becomes balanced, they realize, okay, they put 1 kilo there. Not everything comes back the way we see here. Our world is very different at this stage. And so this is, the wazn is that weight used to weigh things. And so the ayah says, وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ. Maintain the weight with fairness. وَلَا تُقْصِرُوا الْمِيزَانَ. And do not diminish the mizan. Here the mizan is about business transaction. The first one was about the balance in the system that Allah has created. The second mizan was the Sharia itself as a mizan of our amal. And the third is specifying the mizan in business. And this is where we have to realize that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers this concept of justice in mizan to be an important issue. That He would list that between the sama and the arz. He's talking about sama first. He will talk about, arz in ayat number 10. But in between he talks about the mizan, and he emphasizes this mizan which is used when we deal with one another in our business transaction. The importance of this can also be seen in other ayat. Let me just go through it. One is from Surah number 6, ayat 152. وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلَ وَالْمِيزَانَ بِالْقِسْطِ. And basically give full measure. Kail, the word kilo. That comes from Arabic actually. It's an Eastern term. And kale basically was the measure. وَأَوْفُوا الْكَيْلِ, fulfill the measure that you have. وَالْمِيزَانِ بِالْقِسْطِ, and the balance or the way that you have, the weight with justice. Another ayat in the beginning of Surah number 83, Surah Mutaffifin. Who are mutaffifin? Wailun lil mutaffifin. Allah condemns those who are mutaffifin. The word wail is used to condemn somebody. And mutaffifin refers to those people who commit fraud in their business dealings. Who are those? الَّذِينَ إِذَا اكْتَالُوا عَلَى النَّاسِ يَسْتَوْفُونَ. When they make a deal with people for themselves, they always make sure that the balance is right, and they get their full share. وَإِذَا كَالُوهُمْ, but when they do this, measuring, أَوْ وَذَنُوهُ, they did the measure for others, يُخْسِرُونَ, they try to diminish that. And this is indication of the human element of greed, that we have to be very careful about it. And this is important enough by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be mentioned in the Quran, that when we deal with one another, we have to be very careful. Let me just, on a side issue, share with you one mas'ala about business. If you look at the masail, especially mustahabbat, what is recommended. Now these days, again, as I said, all the items are pre-packed. You want 1 kilo, 2 kilo, you just, pick up the bag and then go to the counter. The days when you had to go and, ask the shopkeeper, he will go and put the item in the bag for you and wait for you. The importance of that, of justice and fairness, was that for the merchant, the recommendation was always put a little bit extra. Don't just look at the balance of your mizan. Make sure that the side which has this merchandise that you are giving to the customer is a little bit more, heavier. Why? Because maybe your scale might be not perfect. So just to make sure you're fulfilling your right. The customer on the other side is being told that when you take something from the merchant, take a little bit less than what is your right. Now tell me, if both of them want to do this recommendation, what happens? No deal. Because the merchant is saying, I have been recommended to give a little bit more, and he says, I have been recommended to take a little bit less. The whole point is not necessarily that you implement that. The point is to think about it. That make sure what you are getting is your right and not more than that. And what you are fulfilling on the other side is the complete right of the other fellow. And this is where, sometimes when I extend that to family life, we have so many problems, unfortunately. We are in this part of the world. When you look at marital issues, it's not only among non-Muslims. Muslims who live here are also impacted by the same kind of lifestyle. And this is where sometimes people just look at the laws which is there on the books. They only look for their own haqq. What is my right? They don't really look at what is their duty. And when a husband would come to me and he says, well, the Tawzul Masail says to me that I have absolute right to forbid my wife from leaving the home unless it is necessary. And the masala is there. But I'm telling him that if he implements that, and these days ladies also know the masail quite a lot, they have access to many things now, they will open the next page and there it says that the wife is not obligated to do anything as far as the chores at home is concerned. So she can flip the other side of the page and show you the mas'ala that from tomorrow, even her breakfast, you have to arrange it. Whether you make it yourself or get it bought from somewhere or somebody, so don't, sometimes these rulings are there. Just like this business deal that the merchant has to give a little bit more, the customer has to take a little bit less. If both work on it, the deal will not, go through. But the sense, this understanding of haqq has to be there. And this is where these masails are there, that you have to understand and live your life on the basis of mawadda and rahmah, love and compassion for one another. Salawat padhe. Now, when we look at this issue of mizan here, in this tafsir of Quran, normally we just go with the zahiri tafsir, which is appropriate and that is applicable as far as the rules are concerned. But there is also different levels of tafsir of the same ayat. Our imams have said that even the zahiri meaning of Quran could have 7 layers at the top. And then the batini levels also could have 7 levels by itself. And so there is a zahiri tafsir and then there is a batini tafsir. Of course, the batini tafsir does not negate the zahiri tafsir. When we look at these ayat, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ أَنْ لَا تَتَغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ, there is also a batini tafsir to these 2 sentences. And I would like to share with you that when you look at that perspective, especially, let me emphasize this point I mentioned earlier, that mizan has been mentioned at 3 different levels. One is the balance in the world system that Allah has created. The other is the balance in the form of the divine laws. And the third is the balance in weighing scale when you do business transactions with one another. But going on to the batini tafsir, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعْهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ, the sky, He raised it. And He set up the balance. Sama always refers to something up there. And that's why the sky is known as the sama. So already this ayat is talking about something which is up there, raised, elevated, very, very important. And that's also the source of wahi and divine guidance. The guidance comes from up. And when you put that with the next sentence, وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ, there is a batini perspective to this. That here, the mizan of haqq and batil, and what is right and what is wrong, is the person of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is the mizan. وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevated this canopy over us, the blue sky. وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ, and then He did not just send us without any guidance. Even earlier ayat talked about it. عَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنِ خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانِ عَلَّمَهُ الْبَيَانِ. Here, there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I present to you a mizan of what is right and what is wrong, what is haqq and what is batil, in form of the person of the Prophet of Islam, the last and the best of the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi wa sallam. And after him, of course, the Imams come in. So after Rasulullah, Ali is the mizan for us. He is the mizan of what is haqq and what is batil, what is right and what is wrong. And after him, the Imams who come from his descendants. Actually, in one of the ziyarat that we have for Amir al-Mu'mineen, there is a statement, Salamun ala mizan al-a'mal. Salam to Amir al-Mu'mineen, who is the mizan of the a'mal of the people. Because when you look at the issues of amal, we have to realize to do an amal in a very valid and correct way is one thing, but for it to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something else. And one of the conditions of acceptance of a good deed with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the wilayat of Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. On that batini level, when you go, even the second sentence, أَلَّا تَتَغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ, has a meaning there. The Rasul is a mizan for us, Imam is the mizan for us. And what are we being told now? Do not infringe that balance. What does it mean? It means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created a position for them. And you maintain that balance. Do not go to the extremes. Do not go to the level where the mizan is going down, diminishing. Do not degrade the status of Rasul and Ali and the Imams. Neither should you exaggerate that. And this is the issue of, staying away from taqsir and from ghulu. And that is Sirat al-Mustaqim, that is Mizan, and that is the balance that we have to maintain in our Aqidah about the Prophet of Islam and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wassalam. Let me end with one hadith of the Prophet about Amir al-Mu'mineen being the Mizan, where he says, Aliyun ma'al haqq wal haqqu ma'a aliyin. This is a very well-known statement. But the question comes up. The Prophet didn't only say this about Ali. Even if you look at Ammar bin Yasir, a companion of the Prophet, who was killed in Siffin. About him also the Prophet says, Ammar ma'al haqq wal haqq ma'a Ammar. So what is the difference then between Ali and Ammar? Well, the difference is the dua that Rasulullah did after these words about Ali. When he says, Aliyun ma'al haqq wal haqqu ma'aliyin, then he prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah turn haqq to the same direction that Ali is turning. It's not the issue that Ali, oh Allah, guide him to the haqq and turn Ali to the direction of haqq. Rather, the Prophet prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah turn haqq to the same direction that Ali is turning. And that is the meaning of the mizan of haqq in form of the Imam of our time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasten his appearance, keep us always pleased with him, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our tawfiqat to fulfill the ibadat of this month and the duties that we have, and even to do more than that. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ بِرَحْمَتِكَ يَا أَرْحَمَ الرَّاحِمِينَ.